All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Noita Spell Archives. I'm Alias, and today I bring to you Chaotic Transmutation. Now, Chaotic Transmutation, on its surface, is a pretty simple spell. It transmutes various liquids and powdery substances within a projectile's range into something else. It actually is a spell that kind of does what it says on the tin. It's a very strange spell in the code. And we're going to go over a couple of things that it's supposed to do, what it actually does, and the weird thing that it interacts with on about half of the spells in the game. So, firstly, Chaotic Transmutation is supposed to make a bunch of materials shift multiple times. So if you have water, it's supposed to shift it into 10 different random materials. It does not do that. It shifts the same material 10 times, which makes it an incredibly laggy and goofy spell that doesn't work quite right, but it is kind of funny, and it has a large enough pool of materials that it can turn things into that you can gain access to most of the magical liquids in the game, and you can even acquire Midas or Lively Concoction just by spamming Chaotic Transmute into a pool for long enough. So it is a spell that does have some use on its own. Note that when it is limited, you can only cast 8 of it. However, it is affected by unlimited spells, and you could also use any of the Greek letters to make it go infinite. It's it's limited for a good reason, I would say. But it is pretty handy to play around with, and you can see here that I've just got an oil cloud attached to Chaotic Transmute, and what this will do is it will make whatever the oil cloud would normally create, it'll turn it into a random material, which is, interesting. It could be helpful. But obviously this works with all the clouds, and this is one of the easiest ways to get a lot of a single material. Note that this is a great way of getting blood, silver, and alcohol. If you're looking to do anything perk-related, that could be a pretty good solution for that. But yeah, other than that, that is the base spell. Now I'd like to get into the meat and potatoes of the weirdness that Chaotic Transmute causes. You can see I've got a bunch of wands on the ground here. Don't mind the fire, I'll be fine. Now, there's a ton of spells on these wands. All of these spells have something in common, and it is that Chaotic Transmutation makes them broken somehow. Chaotic Transmutation, for some reason, has the ability to turn off the first line of Lua code on spells, which is just exceedingly strange. It is just a thing that it does in the code. It just shuts off the first line of a spell. Now, that can mean all sorts of really strange things occur, and we're going to go over each of these spells and the various effects that it has. So let's get started. We will start off with projectiles, because I think the projectiles are most likely to be useful, and then we will go from there. Alright, so as you can see, we have a ton of diamonds on the ground here. They are very in the way. So let's start off with Powder Vacuum Field. You can see here, we can cast a couple of them, and all the diamonds go away. Normally, what should happen is that when the powder vacuum disappears, it should redisperse the material upon expiration. But thanks to Chaotic Transmutation, we have just sucked it all up, and all those diamonds are now gone. Extremely convenient. Now, next up, we will show off the Worm Launcher. So Worm Launcher is pretty handy. Note that all of the vacuum fields work in a similar manner, where they simply will remove liquids and powder, and it'll be gone for good. So that's fantastic. Now, Worm Launcher. Worm Launcher completely loses its boomerang ability. You can see here that it made a nice, relatively straight line, And we'll go ahead and take off Chaotic Transmutation just for a comparison. You can see that it loops back at me quite aggressively. Once again, here is without the Chaotic, or with the Chaotic Transmutation, just zooming away. Very convenient. Alright, next up on the list, we have Summon Omega Sawblade, an incredibly deadly spell. The Lua component to this spell is its boomerang factor, which means we can make Summon Omega Sawblade slightly safer than it would be normally. So that's very handy. Next, we've got Plasma Beams. Now, Plasma Beams are very dangerous and extremely powerful. And note that they actually have a base damage of 20 there. So, when we fire that off, we get just the little orb piece, and you can see that it doesn't actually deal damage to the player anymore, which means that this can be used as a fantastic add trigger tool if you use Chaotic Transmutation. So this will tick every single frame that it touches an enemy, just like how piercing works, but it's completely safe to the player. Note that Chaotic Transmutation is potentially dangerous. It can create polymorph and the things along that line. But I think that this is a worthy trade-off on occasion, and a very, very cool effect to make Plasma Beams a little bit safer and a little bit stronger. Now, Glittering Field is another interesting spell that sets projectile speed to 0. There's no other spell in the game that does this, and normally it's really, really annoying. But with Chaotic Transmutation, look at that. We just get some weird little sparkles, and that's it. So enjoy setting your spell speed down to 0 with that. Next up, we have Intense Concentrated Light. Wow. How helpful. It just completely ruins it. All right, and for this one, we are going to need a volunteer. This flask will do just fine. With black holes, normally they have terrifying gravitational effects that can get you killed. However, thanks to Chaotic Transmutation, the gravitational effects are basically entirely removed. You could see there for just a moment there was a slight pull, and we'll actually be getting around to that. The Chaotic Transmutation takes a couple of frames to activate, and because of that, there's a bunch of spells that are actually rather inconsistent that you can see on this wand here, but we'll get to that as we continue. Next up on the list, we have Spiral Shot. Spiral Shot is kind of dumb. You can see the projectile moving away without its orbiting Larpa effect. It's weird. I don't know if there's a reason to do this, but it's kind of funny. Maybe you'll find a reason. Who knows? And Projectile Gravity Field. It doesn't gravitate anymore at all. Here's like an example of like that does nothing. It literally does nothing. But if we were to place another one here, then we can do this. Wowee. Look at that. All right, next on the list, we've got Summon Rock Spirit. I wonder what this one's gonna do. Nothing! It literally does nothing. It's really dumb and pointless. But, hear me out. If we go and take out Explosive Projectile, here's a fun fact a little bit about Rock Spirit. It actually scales quite nicely with Explosive Projectile, dealing the full 325 damage, meaning you can turn Rock Spirit into a slightly better version of itself with this 3-spell combination. Path of Flame is up next. It's very sad. And time for Giga Black Hole. This is an interesting one. So, Giga Black Hole will grow in size pretty nicely, but you might be noticing some weirdness. It stops growing, and it doesn't do nearly the same destruction it does without the Chaotic Transmute. It's very peculiar. It'll make the rubble, but it basically loses a lot of its properties. It's a very interesting one. I would recommend trying this out on the last boss and hoping some large rubble will kill him. It'll work. Trust me. It'll just work. Try it out. Odd Firebolt is up next. Odd Firebolt is alarmingly good. It loses its oddness in exchange for like a seemingly perfect arc. It's really strange feeling. There's no other spell that moves quite like it. Without Chaotic Transmutation and with Chaotic Transmutation. So, you know, maybe give Odd Firebolt a try, finally. Alright, it's time for Chainbolt. Alright, it's time for Expanding Sphere. Expanding Sphere appears normal, but what's this when it hits an enemy? Oh! It only does 3 damage. Yeah, so basically it doesn't gain its expanding damage. It can't reach its peak 75 damage with Chaotic Transmutation on. There might be, like, a reason to use this. I'm gonna let you go imagine. Do it. You figure it out. There's an interaction there, for sure. Alright, once again, we've got Plasma. The Plasma Cutter works the same as the other Plasmas. Very handy. It's nice because that one's a shorter lifetime. We've got Circle of Thunder. This one is normally the one that you shoot into and then lightning comes out. In this situation, no lightning. Cool. Giga Sawblade. What do you think this one will do? It just goes. There's no more boomerang. It just goes. That's kind of good. Maybe. Somebody might be able to make use of that. Here's the liquid vacuum field. Let's slurp up the rest of the garbage on the ground here. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that nice? We're all clear now. Square Barrier. Now, this is a rare one. Normally, when one of a spell type doesn't work, when there's similar spells, like, all of them don't work. So, Square Barrier is a 50-50 spell. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. This one is, like, it's probably, like, the most useless one, right? Like, that's gotta be about as useless as it gets. That's pretty garbage. It's pretty insanely bad. And then we have Flock of Ducks. Can you guess in the comments what Flock of Ducks will do? If you guessed fly completely normally, you're right. They stop flying like weirdos, and they start flying normally. It's something. It is something. And we've got all the summon swarms. Guess what this one's gonna do? They stack up. That's what they do. They don't fly weird like their normal brothers. I don't know why. That's it. They lose their chaotic flight path. All of them do that. That's their thing. That's it. That's their Lua component. All right, that's all the projectiles. Let's move on to the projectile modifiers. You know, I decided before I move on to the projectile modifiers, I should probably show off one thing really quick. When you have a projectile modifier with a Lua component and a projectile with the Lua component alongside Chaotic Transmutation, note that it will affect the Lua component of the Chainbolt, or the projectile, and not the Lua component of the Orbit Larpa. So you can see here, Orbit Larpa is interacting properly. It is following the Chainbolt. The Chainbolt just sucks real bad. So, if we were to swap this out to a Bubble Spark, you will see how they're, like, stacking up weirdly, and the Lua component of the Orbit Larpa is what's getting influenced instead. So yeah, that's a weird one. Another thing to note is that order actually matters for these spells. You can see that we can get the Lua component working every time, assuming the Orbit Larpa is placed after the Chaotic Transmute. So all of the examples we will be showing with the projectile modifiers will be with the projectile modifier before Chaotic Transmute, not afterward. So, let's take a quick look at piercing. In order to demonstrate the effect, we are going to put heavy shot on so that way you can see what is happening. Piercing will occasionally not pierce. Will sometimes lose the piercing component of piercing. It will not multi-hit anymore. Note that the multi-hit component is independent from the self-damage component, meaning that you can still self-damage yourself with piercing with this method. This is basically useless, but really, really weird. Definitely something to note when you're using Chaotic Transmutation. Another weird one that works only half of the time is Linear Arc. You'll see that some of the shots fire off in the normal Linear Arc pattern, while others do not. Very strange. This goes for all of the paths for the most part. They're slightly influenced more or less. You can see this is a Spiral Arc, which just kind of works. It's very peculiar. And here's Horizontal Path. You can see some of them are working, some of them are not. And let's take a look at some other ones. So here's Accelerating Shot. Accelerating Shot is also like a weird 50-50. You can see some of them are slow, some of them actually speed up. Very strange. Decelerating Shot is the same way. Quite weird. Plasma Beam Thrower. This one does work consistently, but it's weird and bad. It's like, hey, would you like to pay 190 mana to sometimes be shot in the face by a laser beam? Because, like, it just shoots the one laser beam for whatever reason. But, like, it'll just shoot you in the face sometimes. I wouldn't recommend using this combo unless you're really into being shot in the face with laser beams. We've got Remove Explosion. This is another one that only works, like, a small amount of the time. This one's a little bit difficult to demonstrate in this room, but you'll have to go test it or take my word for it. Next up, we have Auto Aim. Auto Aim's pretty cool. It becomes less cool when you're using it in this setting. You can see that it doesn't work too good. Bad. It's bad. That's where we're at with that. Okay, it's time to move on to the final modifiers that work a little bit more consistently. Of course, they're all going to be rather strange, but, you know, at least they kind of do something. I mean, not really. They mostly do nothing. Let's do a couple speed rounds. Fireball Thrower, nothing. Other Fireball Thrower, also nothing. That Lightning Thrower, also nothing. Wowee. Tentacler. Jeez Louise. Copy Trail, still nothing. How about Chaotic Larpa? Wow, who would have thought? That means Upward and Downward Larpa, also nothing. Quantum Split, nothing. The Octagonal Bolt Bundle. I mean, that could be useful if you're using like a wand that... okay, hear me out. You picked up a wand in the vault and you're on like 10 HP, and it has Octagonal Bolt Bundle and Chaotic Transmutation on a no-shuffle wand, and also like a single projectile, and you have like wand healing, and you're not going to get hit in the face by the Octagonal Bolt Bundle. That's when that's useful. There you go. Fly Upwards. You can get some cast delay reduction for the low cost of 80 mana. Same thing with Fly Downwards. Wowee. Ping Pong Path. This one is actually useful. You can get rid of the ping pong effect and still get the increased lifetime. So, you know, an actually good one. Sawblade Orbit. Oh, geez Louise. That's terrifying. Let's not do that again. Fireball Orbit. Kind of cool. Maybe useful. I don't know. We're going to save Nuke Orbit. Actually, you know what? Frick it. I'll just do it in the corner over here. My bones. Okay. Up next, we've got Fizzle. This one is another one that only kind of occasionally works. I have had it fizzle before. You know what? Maybe not. Maybe this one does work consistently. It's working pretty consistently so far. We're just going to say that one works. What about Nolla? Nolla is a 50-50 one. Very cool. Orbiting Arc. Kinda orbits just a little bit. We've got Phasing Arc. Once again, you can get the increased lifetime and the projectile speed reduction with that, so that's kind of helpful. Little bit of lifetime and projectile speed reduction seems pretty good. Spiral Arc loses its spiral. Keep in mind that these do keep their damage. These are actually useful effects for if you're using homing, by the way. So like these arcs are worth considering for a Chaotic Transmutation if you're interested in doing something very specific. Floating Arc does not float. Same thing with Avoiding Arc. Neither of them work anymore. So, yeah, enjoy your free cast delay. Earthquake Shot. Doesn't do anything. There you go. That is all of the modifiers that Chaotic Transmute can affect. In fact, pretty much every single spell, I believe, they can affect. One of the things that I want to bring up is that there were notes on one of my wands in this video. And after further experimentation, I was able to get notes working. So, to take more from that, just because a spell has a Lua component on it doesn't always mean that the Chaotic Transmute is going to affect the spell. It's very weird and inconsistent, and it's possible that I missed a spell or two. It's also possible that, you know, there's a couple spells that didn't make it onto the list. But that is the beauty of Noita and the beauty of Chaotic Transmute. It is a very strange and confusing spell that probably doesn't work the way it should, but it's what makes Noita so freaking cool. Yeah, so that's all I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know down below, and you know, consider subscribing, and yeah, maybe I'll do more of these. Thank you, and have a good day. Post outro here. I'd just like to give a big shout out and thank you to Conga Line and Graham, a couple of programmers who helped me properly understand what's going on with Chaotic Transmutation. This video wouldn't have been possible without them. And also, to address the mods that I'm using Spell Labs in the top right and Cheat Menu by Everfades in the top left. Very handy mods. Alright, that's it.